The day I watched a billionaire's world shatter wasn't supposed to be the day I'd question everything I thought I knew about strength. 3 gunshots, 12 hostages, one man nobody saw coming. What happens when the person you've spent your entire life looking down on becomes the only thing standing between you and death? When power, money, and control mean absolutely nothing, and the nobody you dismissed saves your life? This is that story. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The marble floor of Meridian Café cost more per square foot than most people made in a month. Victoria Hale knew this because she'd made the calculation once, standing in this exact spot 3 years ago, deciding whether to acquire the building. She hadn't. The owner refused to sell at her price, and Victoria didn't negotiate. She simply found another location for her morning meetings and let the rejection sit in her chest like a stone she'd learned to carry. That was her gift, really, carrying stones until they felt like nothing at all. She stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows now, her reflection sharp against the October gray of Manhattan. Charcoal suit, hair pulled back severe enough to ache, heels that made her taller than most men she destroyed in boardrooms. The coffee in her hand was black, expensive, exactly 140 degrees. Everything had a temperature. Everything had a price. Ms. Hale? The assistant, Emma, maybe? Emily? Hovered nearby with a tablet. Your 11 o'clock confirmed. Should I have them brought up when they arrive? Victoria didn't look at her. Did I ask you to speak? The silence that followed was answer enough. The girl's heels clicked away, quick and small. Good. Fear kept people sharp. Victoria had learned that the hard way, back when she still believed trust meant something other than weaponized stupidity. She took another sip. The cafe hummed around her. Quiet conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, someone's phone buzzing ignored on a table. 18 people in the room. Victoria had counted them the moment she walked in. Old habit, you didn't build an empire by assuming safety. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of exhaust and that particular New York scent of ambition mixed with garbage. A man walked in, and Victoria's attention snagged on him for half a second before dismissing him entirely. Working class. Obviously. The jacket was clean but worn at the cuffs, jeans that had seen actual work, boots with honest scuffs. He moved like someone used to being invisible, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes down. Probably maintenance. Maybe delivery. Didn't matter. He chose a table near the back, ordered coffee, sat with his back to the wall. Victoria turned away. The world was full of people like that. Furniture with pulses, background noise, and the symphony of people who actually mattered. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Can't make the meeting. Peterson's losing his nerve on the merger. Need you to close him. She typed back without hesitation. Consider it done. This was the language she spoke fluently. Problem, solution, victory. Everything else was just noise between the beats. Victoria. The voice came from behind her, smooth, calculated, belonging to Richard Chen, her head of acquisitions. He appeared beside her like smoke, expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive everything. Richard understood the rules. You didn't rise in Victoria's world by being warm. You rose by being necessary. The Donovan portfolio, he said quietly. There's a complication. There's always a complication. Fix it. This one's personal. His daughter. I don't care about his daughter. Victoria's voice dropped to that particular frequency that made grown men reassess their choices. I care about the 12 million in assets he's sitting on like a dragon with a hoard. You told me this was handled. It will be. I just need... No. She turned to face him fully, and Richard actually stepped back. Half an inch, but she saw it. You need to understand something, Richard. When I ask if something is handled, I'm not asking for a progress report. I'm confirming reality. Are we clear? He nodded. Smart man. Good. Now go make reality match what I was told. Richard left. Victoria returned to her window, her coffee, her careful observation of a world that bent to her will or broke against it. This was power, not the loud kind, not the kind that needed announcement. The quiet kind, the kind that moved mountains by making mountains forget they were supposed to be immovable. Movement caught her eye. The man from earlier, the nobody in the worn jacket, had moved to a different table, closer to the center of the room now. Strange. People usually stayed where they sat. Creatures of habit, all of them. She watched him without really watching, the way you notice a stain on wallpaper. He was maybe late 30s, brown hair that needed cutting, face that had seen weather, hands wrapped around his coffee cup like he was trying to absorb its heat. Everything about him screamed ordinary. Then his eyes moved. Not his head, just his eyes. A quick sweep of the room, professional, controlled, the kind of assessment that didn't draw attention but missed nothing. Victoria knew that look. She'd perfected it herself in boardrooms full of men waiting for her to stumble. But this was different. This wasn't about opportunity. This was about threat. She felt something unusual stir in her chest. Curiosity, maybe? Or recognition. Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it. The man had shifted slightly in his seat, his body angled now toward the door and the counter both. His right hand, the one not holding coffee, rested on his thigh. Relaxed. Too relaxed. Victoria's instincts, honed by years of reading tells and exploiting weaknesses, whispered something she immediately dismissed. She was being paranoid. This was Manhattan. Everyone was paranoid. She finished her coffee, set the cup down with precise care on a nearby table, and decided to leave. The cafe suddenly felt smaller than when she'd arrived. Emma or Emily could reschedule whatever needed rescheduling. Victoria didn't explain her movements. She simply made them. But as she turned toward the exit, she found herself taking a route that passed near the man's table, close enough to see details. The scar above his left eyebrow, thin and white, the way his jacket hung slightly heavy on one side. The absolute stillness in his posture that somehow suggested its opposite, coiled energy, waiting. Their eyes met. Just for a second, maybe less. But Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years, not since the betrayal that had carved her into this current shape. She felt seen, not evaluated, not assessed for use or weakness, just seen. She hated it immediately. "Excuse me." Her voice came out sharper than intended, professional armor snapping into place. "You're in my way." He wasn't. There was plenty of room to pass. But Victoria didn't do uncertainty, and this man had somehow made her uncertain. He looked up at her fully now. Brown eyes, tired at the edges, the kind of tired that didn't come from missing sleep. "Sorry," he said quietly, and started to move his chair. "Don't bother." She stepped past him, heels clicking authority against marble. "Just try to be less present." She felt his attention on her back as she walked away. Steady, unflinching. Like he was cataloging her the way she cataloged threats. Victoria pushed through the cafe door into the October cold, already pulling out her phone to destroy whoever needed destroying next. The encounter evaporated from her mind. Irrelevant. Background noise. Inside, Daniel Cross watched her go, then returned his attention to the room. He'd noticed them 4 minutes ago. 3 men. Wrong clothes for the neighborhood. Eyes that moved too much. Hands that kept checking pockets. The one near the counter had a fresh prison tattoo on his neck. Daniel could see it when the guy turned his head. Recent release, probably. Desperate people made desperate choices. The one by the bathroom kept glancing at his watch. Synchronized timing. That meant planning. The one near the door hadn't ordered anything, just stood there, winter coat too heavy for the temperature inside. Daniel knew what was coming, had known for the last 10 minutes. The question wasn't if, it was when and how bad. He'd positioned himself accordingly. Back table. Clear line to the exit. Multiple angles of approach. His heart rate hadn't changed, hadn't spiked. This wasn't fear. This was something older, something he'd learned in sand and blood, and the particular silence that came before violence. The woman who'd just left, Victoria, he'd heard the Asian guy call her, she'd felt it too. On some level, her predator instincts had recognized the shape of danger even if she couldn't name it. Daniel respected that. Didn't change anything, but he respected it. He took another sip of coffee. Waited. The door opened again. Victoria Hale walked back in. Fuck. She'd forgotten her tablet. Emma, definitely. Emma had texted in a panic, and Victoria had turned around with the particular fury of someone whose carefully constructed schedule had been disrupted by her own human error. Human error. Victoria hated nothing more. She scanned the café, spotted the tablet on the table where Richard had been standing. Of course. She strode toward it, already mentally recalculating her afternoon, already dismissing the minor inconvenience. That's when she saw the nobody from earlier stand up. Not dramatically, not in a way that drew attention, but with purpose. His eyes weren't on her, they were on the man near the bathroom, then the man by the door, then back to the counter. Victoria's hand closed around her tablet. She should leave, should get out, You need to move. The nobody's voice, low and urgent, directed at her. Right now, stay low, stay behind me. She stared at him. Excuse me? Not a suggestion. He was already moving toward her, his body positioning itself between her and… What? The door? The counter? Everything? Victoria felt anger spike, hot and familiar. I don't know what you think. Get down! Someone screamed. The world exploded, not literally, but close enough. The man by the door pulled a gun from his coat. The man near the bathroom pulled another. The one at the counter vaulted over it, screaming something Victoria's brain couldn't process because every cell in her body had suddenly remembered what prey felt like. She froze. 18 people in the room, 17 of them screamed, ducked, scrambled. One didn't. Daniel Cross moved. Not like in movies, no dramatic hero stance, no quippy one-liner. He moved with the ugly efficiency of someone who'd done this before. His hand caught Victoria's wrist, pulled her down behind a table that wouldn't stop bullets, but might stop sightlines. His body covered hers. Not protectively, strategically. Using the table as hard cover, using the angle of approach, using every fucking inch of space. Stay here, he said. Don't move. Don't look. Don't breathe loud. Then he was gone. Victoria's mind, that trillion-dollar instrument of calculation and control, shattered into television static. She could hear screaming, could hear one of the gunmen yelling about phones and wallets and don't fucking move, could hear her own heartbeat like thunder in a cave. She'd been afraid before. When her father's company collapsed. When Thomas… No. Don't think about Thomas. But this was different. This was animal. This was every civilized layer stripped away to reveal the truth underneath. She was fragile. She was mortal. She was nothing. A gunshot. Victoria's hands flew to her ears. Someone was crying. A woman, maybe. Or maybe Victoria herself. She couldn't tell. Couldn't process. The marble floor pressed against her knees and she realized she was shaking. Power meant nothing. Money meant nothing. Control was a lie she'd told herself while building walls that couldn't stop this. She wanted her mother. She wanted to be small again. She wanted movement, close. Victoria looked up and saw Daniel Cross, that nobody in the worn jacket, doing something impossible. He'd closed distance on one of the gunmen, the one from the bathroom, while the guy was focused on the hostages, got inside his reach. There was a moment of struggle, brief and brutal, and then the gun was on the floor and the gunman was on the floor, and Daniel was already moving toward the next threat. He moved like water, like something that couldn't be stopped because it didn't exist in the same dimension as obstacles. The second gunman turned, weapon rising, and Daniel was somehow already there, inside the arc of fire, hand on the guy's wrist, redirecting. A knee somewhere Victoria couldn't see. The particular sound of air leaving lungs. Another gun on the floor. The third gunman, the one by the door, started shooting. Daniel dropped, rolled, came up behind the counter. Victoria watched him move and couldn't reconcile this with the man who'd sat quietly with coffee. This wasn't human. This was, please, please don't, a woman's voice, different from the screaming. This was specific terror. Victoria risked a look around the table, saw a young mother, maybe 25, holding a little girl who couldn't have been more than 5. The third gunman had them, gun to the woman's head, child crying, the mathematics of nightmare. Daniel froze. For the first time since the violence started, he went completely still. Victoria saw his face change, saw something behind his eyes that wasn't calculation or training, something raw. Let them go, Daniel said. His voice had changed too. Quieter, almost gentle. This doesn't need to happen. Fuck you. The gunman's voice cracked. Young, maybe early 20s. The hand holding the weapon shook. You don't know. I need… My brother's sick and I can't." "I know," Daniel said, and somehow, impossibly, he made it sound true. "I know what it feels like when the world gives you no choices, when every door is closed. When you're desperate enough to do things you never thought." "Shut up! You don't know shit." "I do." Daniel took a step forward, slowly, hands visible, empty. "I've been where you are. Different circumstances, same desperation. Let me help." Victoria watched this unfold with the detached unreality of shock. This man, this nobody she'd dismissed, insulted, erased, was negotiating with empathy, was walking unarmed toward a gun, was choosing to be vulnerable. It was the stupidest thing she'd ever seen. It was the bravest thing she'd ever seen. "You can't help." The gunman's voice broke completely. "Nobody can help. System's rigged and we're—" The little girl whimpered, a small sound, but it changed everything. The gunman looked down at her, really looked, saw what he was doing, saw who he'd become. The gun wavered. Daniel moved, not fast, not aggressive. He simply stepped forward and placed his hand on the weapon, gently, like he was calming a frightened animal. "Give me the gun," he said softly. "Please, before this becomes something you can't take back." For a moment, one crystalline moment, Victoria thought it would work, thought this impossible man would somehow talk down an armed robbery through sheer human connection. Then the front window exploded. The first gunman, the one Daniel had disarmed, had crawled to his weapon, had fired wild. The bullet meant for Daniel missed, hit the window instead. Glass became 1,000 pieces of silver rain. Everything happened at once. The young gunman spun toward the sound. His finger tightened on the trigger. Not intentionally, just reflex, just fear. Daniel threw himself at the mother and child, covered them, took the angle of fire. The gun went off. Victoria heard herself scream, heard the sound her throat made when terror found language. Saw Daniel go down, saw blood, saw... No. He was moving, still moving. He'd pushed the mother and child behind the counter, out of the line of fire. He was bleeding, shoulder looked like. But he was getting up, was moving toward the young gunman who'd shot him. "Stop!" The kid was crying now, gun shaking so badly it was a miracle he could hold it. "I didn't mean... I wasn't trying to..." Daniel took the gun from his hands, just reached out and took it. The young man collapsed, sobbing. 2 minutes. The whole thing had taken maybe 2 minutes. Police sirens, close now, getting closer. Daniel stood there, bleeding, holding a weapon he'd taken from someone else, looking at the wreckage of violence and desperation and the thin line between them. Then he looked at Victoria. She was still behind the table, still on her knees, makeup ruined by tears she didn't remember crying, suit wrinkled, image destroyed, everything destroyed. Their eyes met again. That same recognition, that same moment of being seen. But this time, Victoria didn't hate it. This time, she saw who'd been seeing her. The police came in hard, weapons drawn, shouting. Daniel set the gun down carefully, raised his hands. Let them take him to the ground. Let them cuff him. Didn't resist. Didn't explain. Victoria wanted to scream at them, wanted to tell them they had it wrong, wanted to... But her voice wouldn't work. Her body wouldn't work. She just knelt there, watching them take away the man who'd saved her life, while the world slowly came back into terrible focus. An EMT tried to help her up. She pushed them away, found her feet on her own, stood on her own, walked out on her own. But nothing felt like her own anymore. Nothing felt like anything she recognized at all. Utien. The police station smelled like bad coffee and old regret. Victoria sat in a plastic chair that cost maybe $15 and felt every cent of its cheapness. Her suit was ruined. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She'd called her lawyer, her assistant, her head of security. Everyone was handling everything. But she couldn't leave. Daniel Cross sat in an interview room she could see through a window. They'd uncuffed him, had given him water. A detective talked to him, taking notes. Daniel's shoulder had been bandaged. The bullet had gone through, they'd said. Clean. Lucky. Lucky. Victoria watched him through the glass, watched him answer questions with quiet patience, watched him exist in a world she suddenly understood she'd never actually seen. Ms. Hale. A detective approached. Woman, late 40s, eyes that had seen everything twice. We have some questions when you're ready. That man, Victoria said. Her voice sounded strange, distant. Daniel Cross. What happens to him? He gave a statement. We're verifying his background. Former military, looks like, Marine Corps. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Honorable discharge. Works as a mechanic in Queens. The detective paused. He saved a lot of lives today, including yours. I know. Do you? The detective's expression was unreadable. Because, from what witnesses said, you weren't particularly kind to him before everything happened. Victoria felt something crack inside her. Not breaking. Worse, opening. No, she said quietly. I wasn't. They took her statement. She answered every question with mechanical precision. Yes, she'd seen the gunman. No, she hadn't noticed anything suspicious before. Yes, Daniel Cross had warned her. Yes, he'd protected her. Yes, he'd talked down an armed man. Yes, he'd taken a bullet meant for a child. Yes. 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 Every answer felt like confession. When they finished, she stood to leave, stopped, turned back. Can I see him? Daniel Cross? Before I go. The detective considered this, nodded. They led her into the interview room. Daniel looked up when she entered. He looked tired. Looked like someone who'd been tired for a very long time. Ms. Hale, he said. Not warm, not cold, just acknowledgement. Victoria realized she had no idea what to say. How did you thank someone for showing you that everything you'd built your life around was sand? How did you apologize for being exactly the person you'd spent years becoming? You were shot, she finally said. I've been shot before. That's not... She stopped, started again. You saved my life. I saved everyone's life. You just happened to be there. It should have stung, should have felt like dismissal. Instead, it felt like honesty. This man didn't deal in performance, didn't calculate angles. Why? Victoria asked. Why did you do that for strangers? For people who'd never... She couldn't finish the sentence. Daniel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Because I could. Because someone had to. Because there was a little girl who didn't ask to be there, and I've seen what happens when no one steps up. He met her eyes. Because being able to help and choosing not to makes you responsible for what happens next. Victoria felt tears again. Hated them. Let them come anyway. I was cruel to you, she said. Before. At the café. You were you. Daniel shrugged. Winced at the pain it caused his shoulder. People are what they are. I'm not mad about it. You should be. Why? You didn't know me. You made an assumption based on limited information. That's not cruel. That's just human. But it was cruel, Victoria thought. She'd made a career out of that particular cruelty, had weaponized judgment and wielded it like a blade, had built walls so high she'd forgotten what it felt like to see over them. I want to help, she said suddenly. However you need, medical bills, legal fees, anything. Daniel smiled, small, sad. I don't need your money, Ms. Hale. Then what do you need? He looked at her for a long moment, really looked. Saw past the armor and the image and the carefully constructed fortress, saw the person underneath, the one Victoria had almost forgotten existed. I need you to understand something, he said quietly. What happened today, that wasn't about you. Wasn't about proving anything or teaching lessons. It was about a choice, about being the person I needed to be in that moment. He paused. But what happens next? After the adrenaline fades and the shock wears off? That's on you. You get to choose what kind of person you want to be when the world isn't watching. Then he stood. The detective appeared, said something about giving him a ride home. Daniel nodded, started to leave. Wait, Victoria said. Your daughter. The police mentioned you have a daughter? Daniel's face changed, softened in a way that made Victoria's chest ache. Sarah, she's 8, staying with my sister today. He smiled and it was genuine, real. She's the reason I'm still here, the reason any of this matters. Victoria thought about her penthouse. Her empty, perfect penthouse, with its expensive silence and carefully curated loneliness, thought about what mattered, what actually mattered. "Can I meet her?" The words came out before she could stop them. "I'd like to meet her. If you'd allow—" Daniel studied her, not judging, just considering. "Maybe," he said finally, "when you've figured out why you actually want to." Then he was gone. Victoria stood in the interview room, surrounded by cheap furniture and flickering fluorescent lights, and the ghost of who she'd been 3 hours ago. Her phone buzzed. 17 messages. 3 missed calls. The world demanding her attention, her decisions, her power. She turned it off. For the first time in 15 years, Victoria Hale turned off her phone and just stood there, letting herself feel everything she'd spent those years learning not to feel. Fear, shame, gratitude. And underneath it all, small but growing. The terrible, wonderful possibility that she could be someone different, someone better, someone human. Outside, October rain began to fall on Manhattan. The city moved on, indifferent to revelation. But in a police station in Midtown, a woman who'd built an empire on the bones of her own heart started the long, painful work of remembering what it felt like to beat. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. Victoria stood at her penthouse window watching water streak down glass that cost more than most people's cars, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd actually noticed weather. Weather was something other people dealt with, something that happened to them while she moved through climate-controlled spaces and climate-controlled cars to climate-controlled meetings where she controlled everything else. But now she noticed. Now she watched the rain like it was trying to tell her something. Her phone sat on the counter behind her. Still off. 48 hours dark. Her assistant had shown up at her door twice. Victoria hadn't answered. Her lawyer had threatened to call the police for a wellness check. She'd texted back a single word: "Don't." The city sprawled below her, indifferent and massive. Somewhere down there, Daniel Cross was living his life, going to work, picking up his daughter from school, existing in a world Victoria had spent years pretending didn't matter. She couldn't stop thinking about the café, the moment the guns came out, the way her entire carefully constructed reality had collapsed into animal terror in less than a second. But more than that, she couldn't stop thinking about what came after. The interview room. Daniel's quiet voice saying things that shouldn't have landed, but somehow cut straight through every defense she'd built. When you figured out why you actually want to, Victoria turned from the window. Her reflection caught in the dark screen of her television, a woman in an old sweatshirt and no makeup, hair loose, looking like someone she didn't recognize. She'd showered 4 times since leaving the police station. Couldn't wash off the feeling of kneeling on that marble floor while the world ended around her. Her tablet sat on the coffee table. The one she'd gone back for. The one that had put her in the cafe when the shooting started. She picked it up, unlocked it, stared at the 17 emails marked urgent, contracts, acquisitions, deals that were bleeding money every hour she delayed. She set it back down. Something was broken inside her. Or maybe something had finally stopped being broken. She couldn't tell which. The intercom buzzed. Victoria almost didn't answer, then realized it might be important. Might be... "Ms. Hale?" The doorman's voice, apologetic. "There's a gentleman here to see you. Says his name is Richard Chen. Should I send him up?" She regretted it immediately, but it was too late. 3 minutes later, Richard stood in her living room looking around like he'd entered a crime scene. "Jesus, Victoria, what happened here?" She followed his gaze, saw what he saw. Dishes in the sink, paper scattered on the counter, her gym bag still unpacked from 3 days ago. The controlled perfection she usually maintained had slipped, not dramatically, just enough to show the cracks. "I've been processing," she said. Processing. Richard's tone was careful, too careful. "Look, I get it. What happened at the cafe was traumatic. But you've got the Peterson merger falling apart, the Donovan portfolio in limbo. And Marcus is about to... I don't care." The words came out flat, simple, true. Richard stared at her. "You don't care. About the merger, about Donovan, about any of it." Victoria sat down on her couch, felt the exhaustion of 3 days catching up. "I almost died, Richard. Some kid barely out of his teens had a gun to a woman's head, and I watched a man I'd insulted take a bullet, and none of what we do, mattered at all. That's the trauma talking. Is it? She looked at him, really looked. Saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he was already trying to figure out how to use this, how to position himself. Or is it the first honest thing I've said in years? Richard sat down across from her. His expression shifted to something approximating concern, but Victoria could see the mechanics underneath. This was a negotiation. Everything was always a negotiation. You built something incredible, he said. You can't just walk away because you had a bad day. A bad day! Victoria laughed. It sounded wrong, brittle. I watched a man save my life while bleeding from a gunshot wound. I watched him talk down someone who was desperate enough to kill. And the whole time, all I could think was that I'd looked at him 2 minutes before and seen nothing, saw furniture, saw someone beneath my notice. So you feel guilty. That's normal. Make a donation. Fund a charity. Hell, give the guy some money and move on. He doesn't want my money. Everyone wants money. He doesn't. Victoria stood up, walked back to the window. He wants me to figure out why I want to help. Wants me to understand something I'm not sure I'm ready to understand. Richard was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, softer, almost genuine. What do you want me to tell Marcus, the board? They're asking questions. Tell them I'm taking time. How much time? I don't know. Victoria, I don't know. She spun to face him. I don't know what I'm doing or what happens next or how to be the person I was 3 days ago. All I know is that person almost got me killed. That person looked at someone who turned out to be the difference between life and death and saw nothing worth seeing. Richard stood, adjusted his tie. The gesture of a man retreating to familiar ground. I'll handle things. Take your time. But Victoria, people are already circling. They smell blood in the water. You stay gone too long. There might not be anything to come back to. She should have cared about that. 3 days ago, the threat of her empire crumbling would have sent her into controlled fury, would have triggered every survival instinct she'd honed. Now she just felt tired. Then I guess I'll find out what I'm actually worth, she said. Richard left. The apartment felt bigger in his absence, quieter. Victoria stood there listening to the rain and the distant sound of traffic and something else, something she'd been avoiding since she turned off her phone. Her own thoughts. She pulled out her laptop, opened a browser, typed, Daniel Cross Queen's Mechanic. Nothing. Or nothing useful. A sparse social media presence. A business page for a garage called Honest Work Auto Repair. Reviews that used words like reliable, fair, trustworthy. The vocabulary of a life lived small and decent. She found a phone number, stared at it for 20 minutes before closing the laptop. What would she even say? Thank you felt inadequate. I'm sorry felt worse. I want to understand why you're not angry at me felt pathetic and true. The rain kept falling. Victoria made coffee, drank it black like always, but tasted it for the first time in years. It was bitter. She'd always known it was bitter, but she'd stopped letting herself register the information. Had stopped letting herself register a lot of things. Her phone powered on felt like a physical sound, even though it was silent. Notifications flooded in, missed calls, texts, the urgent machinery of her life demanding attention. She scrolled through them with distant interest. Marcus angry, the board concerned, competitors already probing for weakness. One text stood out. From Emma, her assistant. Ms. Hale, I hope you're okay. Take all the time you need. I'll handle what I can. Also, the man from the café called the office. Daniel Cross. Said if you wanted to reach him, you could. Left a number. Victoria's hand shook. She set the phone down. Picked it up again. Read the message 3 more times. He'd reached out. Why? Pity? Concern? Or something else? She dialed before she could talk herself out of it. 3 rings. 4. Then a voice. Familiar. Steady. Hello? Mr. Cross, it's Victoria Hale. A pause. She could hear background noise, the sound of tools, music playing low. Ms. Hale, didn't expect to hear from you. You called my office. I did. Wanted to make sure you were okay. What happened at the cafe? That kind of thing sticks with people. Victoria sat down. Her legs suddenly felt uncertain. I'm fine. I mean, I'm not fine, but I'm not injured. That's good. Silence. Not awkward. Just space between people who didn't know each other, but had been forced to see each other anyway. I've been thinking, Victoria said, about what you said at the police station, about figuring out why I wanted to help. And did you figure it out? No. The honesty felt like stepping off a cliff. I don't know why. I just know I can't stop thinking about it. About you, about your daughter, about the fact that you have this whole life I dismissed in 2 seconds and I don't even know what I dismissed. Daniel was quiet. She heard him set something down, move to a quieter space. You want to meet Sarah. Is that wrong? I don't know, is it? Victoria laughed. It came out shaky. You're not making this easy. Wasn't trying to, but his tone was softer. Look, Ms. Hale. Victoria, please, just Victoria. Victoria. He said it carefully, testing the weight. I appreciate the call. And if you're serious about wanting to understand, about actually seeing this life you're so curious about, then yeah, you can meet Sarah. But not because you feel guilty. And not because you're trying to fix something in yourself by playing around in someone else's reality. Then why? Because you actually want to know. Because you're ready to sit with being uncomfortable. Because you understand that this isn't about you. Victoria felt tears again. Different this time. Not fear, not shock. Something rawer. When? Saturday? Noon. I'll text you the address. It's not Manhattan. You'll have to leave your world for a bit. Okay. And Victoria? Come as yourself. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just the person who's trying to figure some things out. He hung up. Victoria sat holding her phone, staring at the screen like it held answers. She didn't know what she'd just agreed to. Didn't know what she was doing. But for the first time in 3 days, she felt something other than lost. She felt almost like herself, or maybe like someone she used to be, or someone she could become. The rain was slowing. Victoria watched it taper to drizzle, then stop. The city emerged wet and gray and somehow cleaner. She made more coffee, opened her laptop again, started reading the reviews for Honest Work Auto Repair. One stuck with her, a woman whose car had broken down with her kids in it late at night. Daniel had stayed past closing to fix it, refused to charge her. The review ended. He said some things matter more than money. I didn't believe people like that existed anymore. Victoria believed it now, had seen it, had been saved by it. She spent the rest of the day reading about Daniel's garage, about the neighborhood, about Queens in general, a place she'd driven through 100 times without ever really seeing. The city was bigger than she'd remembered, fuller, more human. That night, she dreamed about the cafe. But this time, when the guns came out, she didn't freeze. This time, she moved, helped, did something other than become small and scared and useless. She woke up knowing it was a lie, knowing that in real life she'd been exactly as helpless as she felt. But the dream stayed with her anyway. A possibility. A different version of events where she was more than her fear. Friday came, Victoria went into the office, walked through doors she'd walked through 1,000 times and felt like a stranger. People stared, whispered. She'd been gone almost a week. In her world, that was geological time. Marcus cornered her in her office within 5 minutes. Where the hell have you been? Processing trauma, Victoria said. She sat at her desk. It felt foreign. What did I miss? Marcus laid it out. The Peterson merger dead. The Donovan portfolio sold to a competitor. 3 board members making noise about leadership stability. Everything she'd built showing cracks. Victoria listened, nodded, felt nothing. You don't seem concerned, Marcus said. I'm not. Victoria, they're coming for you. Chen's already positioning himself. Another week like this, and let them. She looked at him, saw the confusion, the calculation. If the whole thing falls apart because I took a week to remember I'm human, then it deserved to fall apart. That's not how this works. Maybe it should be. Marcus left. Victoria sat in her office, surrounded by the monuments of her success. Awards, Photos with politicians and celebrities, stock certificates, the entire carefully curated museum of achievement. It all looked like someone else's life. She made it through the day. Meetings, calls, decisions. But her mind was elsewhere. On Saturday, on Queens, on a little girl named Sarah who represented everything Victoria had sacrificed to get here. That night, she went through her closet. Everything was designer. Everything was armor. She had nothing that qualified as just herself. Finally settled on jeans, expensive, but still jeans, and a simple sweater. Looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone trying very hard to look casual. It would have to do. Saturday morning came with weak sunshine and Victoria's nerves. She stood outside a small house in Astoria at 11:57 a.m., wondering if she should knock or wait or run back to Manhattan and forget this whole thing. The door opened. Daniel stood there in worn jeans and a flannel shirt, looking exactly like he had at the café. Real, solid, present. "You came," he said. "I said I would." "People say a lot of things." He stepped back. "Come on in." The house was small, maybe 1,000 square feet, but it was lived in, warm. There were drawings on the refrigerator, shoes by the door, the particular chaos of a child's presence. Victoria felt like an alien landed in a world she'd only read about. "Sarah's in the backyard," Daniel said. "Fair warning, she's 8 and has no filter. If she says something that makes you uncomfortable, that's just how kids are." "I can handle an 8-year-old. Can you?" He smiled. "We'll see." They walked through a kitchen that smelled like pancakes and coffee, through a back door to a small yard where a little girl with brown hair and a ponytail was attempting to build something with sticks and string. "Dad!" She looked up. "This isn't working. I need better materials." "Sarah, we have company." Daniel put his hand on Victoria's shoulder. Light, brief. "This is Victoria." "Victoria, this is Sarah." The girl studied her with the unnerving directness of children. "You're really pretty. Are you rich?" Victoria blinked. Yes, I am." "Cool. Dad says rich people are just people with more money and usually more problems. Do you have problems?" Daniel laughed. "Sarah, maybe ease up on the interrogation. You said I should always ask questions when I meet someone new." "I did say that." He looked at Victoria. "My fault." "It's fine." Victoria crouched down to Sarah's level. "Yes, I have problems. Different from some people's problems, but problems." "What kind?" "Sarah," Daniel started. "No, it's okay." Victoria thought about it. "I have trouble figuring out what matters, and I'm not always very nice to people, and I'm trying to learn how to be better." Sarah considered this. "That's good. Dad says the people who know they need to be better are already halfway there. The ones who think they're perfect are stuck." Victoria felt something crack in her chest. "Your dad's pretty smart. I know, he got shot saving people. Did he tell you?" "I was there." Sarah's eyes went wide. "You were at the cafe? Were you scared?" "Terrified." "But you're okay now." "I'm working on it." Sarah seemed to accept this. "Want to help me build a fort? I'm trying to make one, but the sticks keep falling." Victoria looked at Daniel. He shrugged. She asked. So Victoria Hale, who controlled $1 billion empire, spent the next hour in a backyard in Queens trying to build a fort out of sticks and old blankets with an 8-year-old who had opinions about everything. Sarah talked nonstop. About school. About her friends. About how her mom had died when she was 4, but she still remembered some things. About how her dad was the best, even though he worried too much. Daniel sat on the back steps, watching. Not hovering, just present. Every so often, Sarah would run over to show him something, and he'd respond with the kind of patience Victoria had never seen in her world. "Your fort's crooked," Sarah announced, "but it's okay. First tries usually are." "Story of my life," Victoria muttered. They got the fort standing eventually. Sarah declared it acceptable and immediately started planning improvements. Then she got distracted by a butterfly and ran off to chase it. Daniel stood, walked over to where Victoria sat in the grass, feeling ridiculous and somehow lighter than she had in years. "You're good with her," he said. I have no idea what I'm doing. That's what makes it good. You're not performing, just trying. Victoria watched Sarah jump around the yard, arms spread like wings. She's amazing. You're lucky. I know. Daniel sat down beside her. After Afghanistan, after everything I saw there, I came back not sure what the point was. Then my sister died. Car accident. And suddenly I had Sarah, this little person who needed me to be okay, needed me to figure out how to live again. He paused. She saved my life more than I saved hers. The café, Victoria said quietly. When that kid had the gun on the mother and daughter, your face changed. All I could see was Sarah, what it would feel like if someone... He stopped, breathed. I couldn't let that happen. They sat in silence. Sarah found a stick and started sword fighting with invisible enemies. The afternoon sun was weak but present. Victoria felt her phone buzz in her pocket, ignored it. Why did you really want to meet her? Daniel asked. Victoria thought about lying, about giving some polished answer, decided against it. Because I don't have this, any of this. I have success and money and power and an apartment that echoes. And I watched you take a bullet for strangers and then talk about your daughter like she's the only thing in the world that matters. And I realized I don't have anything I'd take a bullet for. That's sad. I know. But you're here. That counts for something. Does it? Daniel looked at her. You tell me. Why are you here? Really? Victoria watched Sarah, thought about the question, about what was true underneath all the layers of who she'd become. Because I'm tired, she said finally. I'm so tired of being the person I've been, and I don't know how to be anyone else. But I thought maybe if I saw how you live, what you chose, I might understand what I'm missing. And do you understand? I'm starting to. She met his eyes. You chose people, connection, things that matter even when they're hard. I chose power because I was afraid, because I thought if I was strong enough, untouchable enough, nothing could hurt me again. What hurt you? Daniel asked. Gentle, not prying, just offering space. Victoria surprised herself by answering. Someone I trusted, someone I loved. He took everything, my father's company, my inheritance, my ability to trust. And I decided never again. I'd build my own empire. I'd never be vulnerable, never be weak. Being vulnerable isn't weak. It feels like it. That's because it's brave. Weak is easy. Weak is hiding. You're here, sitting in my yard, admitting things that probably terrify you. That's not weak, Victoria. That's the opposite. Sarah ran over. I'm hungry. Can Victoria stay for lunch, please? Daniel looked at Victoria. Can you? She should say no, should get back to Manhattan, should handle the 17 things demanding her attention, should be the person she'd spent 15 years becoming. Yes, Victoria said. I'd like that. Lunch was grilled cheese and soup. They ate at a small table that wobbled. Sarah talked about her fort-building plans and asked Victoria questions about what it was like to be rich. Daniel told stories about the garage, about customers who became friends, about a city Victoria had never really seen. And Victoria listened, really listened, not calculating, not strategizing, just being present in a moment that didn't require her to be anything other than herself. When lunch ended, Sarah asked if Victoria would come back next week. Victoria looked at Daniel. He nodded. I'd love to, Victoria said. Meant it. She left as the afternoon started fading, stood on the sidewalk, looking back at the small house. Daniel walked her out. Thank you, she said, for this, for letting me in. You're welcome. But Victoria, this isn't charity. This isn't me fixing you. You want to keep coming around, you show up as a real person, not a project, not guilt, just someone who wants to be here. I do, want to be here. Then we'll see you next week. Victoria drove back to Manhattan. The city rose around her, steel and glass and ambition. She'd built a piece of it, owned parts of it. But sitting in traffic, she realized she'd never actually lived in it. Her phone had 43 missed calls. The board was in crisis. Richard had made moves. Her empire was bleeding. She should care, should panic, should go into war mode. Instead, she felt calm. Or maybe not calm. Maybe just clear. For the first time in 15 years, she knew what mattered, knew what was real. Everything else was just noise between the beats. The board meeting started at 9. Victoria walked in at 9:15. She'd never been late to a board meeting in her life. Lateness was weakness. Lateness was losing control before you even sat down. But this morning she'd stopped for coffee at a place that didn't know her name, and the line had been long, and she'd decided it didn't matter. That decision cost her. "Ms. Hale, how kind of you to join us." Marcus sat at the head of the table. Her seat. Victoria noted this with distant interest. 3 weeks ago, she would have eviscerated him for the power play. Now she just set down her coffee and took the empty chair nearest the door. "Marcus." "Everyone." She nodded at the 12 faces staring at her like she'd grown a second head. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic." There was no traffic. They all knew there was no traffic. Victoria Hale didn't do traffic. She had drivers who knew every shortcut, every timing, but nobody called her on the lie. "We need to discuss the situation," Marcus said. His voice had that careful tone people used when they thought you might break. "The Peterson merger falling through cost us $18 million. Donovan went to Hemisphere Capital, and there are 3 major clients requesting meetings to reassess the relationship. I'm aware. Are you?" This from Robert Chen, Richard's father, old guard, the kind of man who thought women in power were adorable until they actually wielded it. "Because from where we're sitting, it looks like you've checked out. A week gone without explanation. Meetings missed. Decisions delayed. We're hemorrhaging confidence." Victoria took a sip of her coffee. It was still too hot. She drank it anyway. "What would you like me to say, Robert? That you're back? That you're focused? That whatever crisis of conscience you're having is over?" "It's not over." The room went silent. Marcus leaned forward. "Victoria, I had a gun pointed at my head 3 weeks ago." Her voice was calm, steady. "I watched people I'd never met risk their lives for strangers. I watched a man take a bullet for a child who wasn't his. And I came back here and realized that nothing we do, none of this, would matter if I died tomorrow." "That's the trauma talking," Robert said. "You need time, therapy, whatever helps you process. But this company needs leadership. Then lead." Victoria met his eyes. "I'm not stopping anyone, but I'm also not going to pretend this matters the way it used to. $18 million matters. Does it?" She looked around the table. "We made $63 million last quarter. We'll make more next quarter. The money doesn't stop. It never stops. And none of you, not one, would show up to my funeral and think about the Peterson merger." Marcus stood. "I think we need a break. Victoria, can I speak with you privately?" She followed him to a conference room down the hall. He closed the door. Didn't sit. Just stood there looking at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "What happened to you?" he asked. "I woke up." "You're sabotaging yourself. Everything you built. Everything I built is still there. The company's fine. The numbers are fine. What's not fine is everyone's assumption that I need to be the same person I was a month ago." Marcus rubbed his face. Tired. She'd never noticed how tired he looked. "They're going to push you out. Robert's already talking to board members. Richard's positioning himself as the steady hand. You keep this up, they'll vote you out by end of quarter. Let them. Victoria, I mean it." She sat on the edge of the conference table. "If they want to remove me for having a life outside this building, then maybe I don't want to be here." "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years." She looked at him, really looked. Marcus had been with her since the beginning, had worked 100-hour weeks, had sacrificed relationships, health, everything. For what? "When's the last time you took a vacation?" "What?" "A real vacation, not a working trip, just time off." Marcus blinked. "I don't know, 5 years? 6? "When's the last time you saw your daughter?" His expression shuddered. "That's not relevant." "She's 15, right? Lives with your ex-wife in Boston? When did you last visit?" "I don't see how—" "I met a little girl 3 weeks ago," Victoria said quietly. "She's 8. Her father works as a mechanic, makes maybe $50,000 a year, and she's happier than anyone I've ever met in this building. You know why?" Marcus didn't answer. "Because her father chose her. Every day. Over money, over advancement, over everything we chase. He chose the thing that mattered. We're not all heroes who save people from gunmen, Victoria. Some of us are just trying to survive. Are we? Surviving? She stood. Or are we so busy winning that we forgot to check if the prize was worth it? She left him there, walked back to the boardroom, collected her things, and walked out. 17 people watched her go. Nobody stopped her. Her office felt like a museum. She stood in the doorway, looking at 15 years of her life, condensed into awards and photos, and the particular aesthetic of success. Then she started packing. Emma appeared in the doorway. Ms. Hale, what are you doing? Taking some things home. But the meeting is over. For me, anyway. Victoria pulled a photo from the wall, her and the mayor at some fundraiser. She couldn't remember which one, couldn't remember why it had seemed important to display. Emma, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy here? Emma's face did something complicated. That's not really the question, is it? This is a good job. Great resume builder. The pay is... That's not what I asked. The younger woman was quiet for a moment. No, she said finally. I'm not happy, but I'm 26. I'm not supposed to be happy. I'm supposed to be building something. What if building something and being happy weren't mutually exclusive? Is that possible? Victoria set down the photo. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. She took 3 boxes of things that actually mattered, left the rest. On her way out, she stopped by Marcus's office. I'm taking a leave of absence, she said, effective immediately. You can tell the board I'm dealing with trauma. They'll buy that. Richard can handle operations. He's been angling for it anyway. How long? I don't know. Victoria, if you do this, I know. I might lose everything. I'm okay with that. She wasn't entirely okay with that, but she was something close to it, close enough to walk out the door. The city was bright and cold. November had arrived while she wasn't paying attention. Victoria stood on the sidewalk, 3 boxes stacked beside her, and realized she had nowhere she needed to be. No meeting, no crisis, no empire demanding attention. The freedom felt like vertigo. She called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. Hey, everything okay? I just quit my job. Sort of. Maybe. I don't know what I just did. Where are you? Outside my building. I have boxes. I don't know why I called. I just... Stay there. I'm coming. You don't have to... But he'd already hung up. Victoria sat on her boxes and waited. People rushed past her. Nobody looked twice. She was just another person on a New York sidewalk. Anonymous. Invisible. It was wonderful. Daniel showed up 40 minutes later in a truck that had seen better decades. He pulled up, got out, looked at her sitting there. You okay? I walked out of a board meeting, packed my office, told them I was taking a leave of absence that might be permanent. How does that feel? Victoria thought about it. Terrifying, and right, mostly terrifying. That's normal. He picked up 2 of her boxes. Come on, Sarah's at a friend's house. We can go to the garage, get you sorted out. She followed him to the truck, climbed in. The passenger seat was worn but clean. There was a child's drawing taped to the dashboard, a stick figure labeled Dad with a cape. Sarah drew that after the café thing, Daniel said, noticing her looking. Decided I was a superhero. Tried to explain that I'm not, but 8-year-olds don't really do nuance. They drove in comfortable silence. Queens spread around them, familiar buildings in an unfamiliar light. Victoria watched neighborhoods blur past, each one a world she'd never entered. The garage was small, 2 bays, walls covered in tools and old calendars and photos of cars. A radio played something classical. A man in coveralls worked under a Honda. Tommy, Daniel called out. Taking a break in the office. You good out here? A thumbs up from under the Honda. The office was barely an office. Desk, 2 chairs, filing cabinet, coffee maker that had survived at least 1 war. Daniel poured 2 cups without asking, handed her one. So, he said, you walked out. I walked out. Any idea what happens next? None whatsoever. Victoria wrapped her hands around the cup. They'll probably force me out completely. Richard will take over. The company will keep running. And I'll have blown up my entire life for. She stopped. I don't even know what for. For the chance to figure out what you actually want. What if I don't want anything? What if I just don't want what I had? Daniel leaned back in his chair. When I came back from Afghanistan, I was a mess. PTSD, nightmares, the whole package. And everyone kept asking what I wanted to do with my life. Like there was supposed to be some grand plan, some purpose. He paused. Took me 2 years to realize the answer was simple. I wanted to be okay. I wanted to help people when I could. I wanted to be there for Sarah. That was it. No empire. No legacy. Just a decent life. That sounds too simple. Most important things are simple. We just make them complicated because simple feels like it shouldn't be enough. Victoria thought about her penthouse, her cars, her closets full of clothes she wore once, the things she'd accumulated like armor against the world. I don't know how to be simple, she said. Nobody does it first. You practice. The classical music from the garage filtered through, something sad and beautiful. Victoria closed her eyes, let it wash over her. Can I stay here for a while? She asked. I know that's weird. I just don't want to go back to my apartment yet. Not weird. There's paperwork that needs organizing if you want to help. Otherwise, there's a chair. You can just sit. She chose the paperwork. Spent the next 3 hours organizing invoices and receipts while Daniel worked on cars, and Tommy came in occasionally to ask questions or tell jokes. It was mindless work, simple work, the kind of thing she had people for, and it was exactly what she needed. Around 4, Sarah showed up, burst through the door with the energy of elementary school release. Victoria! She looked genuinely happy. Dad said you might be here. Did you quit your job? That's so cool. I want to quit school sometimes, but Dad says education is important. It is important, Victoria said, filing away the last invoice. But sometimes you need to step back and figure out what you're learning for. Are you going to work here now? With Dad? Daniel laughed. I don't think Victoria wants to be a mechanic, kiddo. Why not? You like cars? I've never thought about it, Victoria admitted. I just pay people to fix mine when they break. That's boring. You should learn. Dad can teach you. He's really good. Victoria looked at Daniel. He shrugged. She's not wrong, and you're welcome to hang around if you want. Can't pay you much. I don't need... She stopped. Thought. Actually, yes. I'd like that. Not for money. Just to learn something new. Dating sua kismokas. Really? Really? So that's how Victoria Hale, former CEO of a billion-dollar investment firm, started spending her afternoons in a garage in Queens, learning the difference between a socket wrench and a torque wrench. The first week was humbling. She couldn't do anything right. Stripped bolts, dropped tools, cut herself on sharp metal edges. Sarah thought it was hilarious. Tommy was patient in the way of people who'd seen incompetence before. Daniel taught her the basics with the same calm he'd used to talk down a gunman. It's just mechanics, and he said, showing her how to change oil. Everything has a system. You learn the system, you can fix it. What if the system's broken? Then you build a new one. By the second week, she could do basic maintenance. By the third, she was helping Tommy with repairs while Daniel handled the complicated jobs. Her hands developed calluses. Her nails stayed short and unpolished. She stopped wearing designer clothes, started buying jeans from Target. Her phone still rang. The board still demanded answers. Marcus sent daily texts ranging from concern to fury. Richard had apparently moved into her office. The company was restructuring around her absence. She didn't care. Or she did care, but not the way she used to. It was like watching a movie of her old life. Interesting, distant, not quite real anymore. What was real was Sarah asking her to help with homework. Was Tommy teaching her about transmissions? Was Daniel making coffee in the morning and asking how she slept? What was real was coming home to her penthouse, still hers for now, and feeling like a stranger in her own space. She started spending less time there, would grab clothes, check mail, then head back to Queens. Started having dinner with Daniel and Sarah more nights than not. Started helping Sarah build better forts in the backyard. Started feeling like a person instead of a position. One night, about a month after she'd walked out of the board meeting, she sat on Daniel's back steps watching Sarah chase fireflies in the dusk. Daniel sat beside her, beer in hand, comfortable silence between them. "They're going to force you out, officially," he said. Not a question. He'd seen her checking her phone earlier, seen the expression on her face. "Special board meeting next week. Vote of no confidence. Marcus says I can fight it, but you don't want to." "I don't know what I want." She watched Sarah catch and release a firefly, laughing. "I built that company from nothing. It was everything. And now it feels like it was never mine at all." "Maybe it wasn't. Maybe you built it for someone you used to be." Victoria turned to look at him. "Who am I now?" "Someone figuring it out. That's not nothing." "It feels like nothing. I'm 42 years old, sleeping on my friend's couch half the time, learning to change oil like a teenager with their first job." "Is that what this is?" Daniel asked quietly. "Friendship?" The question hung there. Sarah called out that she'd caught 3 fireflies. They both waved. The moment stretched. "I don't know what this is," Victoria said finally. "I don't know how to categorize it. You saved my life. I inserted myself into yours. And now I'm here and I don't have the language for what here means." "Does it need language?" "Everything needs language. That's how you define things, control them. Maybe some things don't need controlling." Victoria felt something shift, had been feeling it shift for weeks if she was honest. The way Daniel looked at her when she managed to fix something, the way she caught herself watching him work, the way Sarah had started calling her by name instead of Dad's friend. The shape of something unnamed growing between them. "I'm a mess," she said. "My life is imploding. I don't know who I am without my company. I'm probably going to lose everything. That's not fair to you, to Sarah, to whatever this is becoming." "Fair's got nothing to do with it." Daniel set down his beer. "Look, I'm not good at this, at talking about feelings or whatever, but I know what I see. I see someone brave enough to walk away from everything they built because they realized it wasn't making them happy. I see someone who shows up, who tries, who's good to my daughter." He paused. "I see someone I like having around. That's not enough." "Why not?" "Because I'm broken, because I don't know how to do this, because you're scared." He said it gently. "That's okay. I'm scared too." "Of what?" "Of getting this wrong. Of Sarah getting attached and then you deciding you want your old life back. Of letting myself want something and having it blow up." He looked at her. "But I'm also tired of being scared. Been doing that since Afghanistan. Since my sister died. Since I realized the world was big and dangerous and nothing was guaranteed. And you know what? Being scared didn't protect me from anything, just made me smaller." Sarah ran over. "I'm cold. Can we go inside?" "Yeah, kiddo. Go on. We'll be right there." She disappeared into the house. Daniel stood, offered Victoria his hand. She took it. Let him pull her up. They stood there, hands still touching. "Stay," he said. "Tonight. Not on the couch. Not as a friend figuring things out. Stay because you want to see what happens if you stop running." Victoria's instinct was to say no, to protect herself, to maintain distance and control and all the armor that had kept her safe and alone for 15 years. Instead, she said, "Okay." They went inside, made dinner. Sarah talked about her day. They did dishes together, put Sarah to bed together. And when the house was quiet and dark, Victoria followed Daniel to his room and let herself be vulnerable for the first time in longer than she could remember. It wasn't perfect. She didn't know what she was doing, cried at one point for reasons she couldn't articulate. Daniel held her, didn't ask questions, just let her be messy and human and scared. "I'm going to mess this up," she whispered. "Probably. I will too. That's how people work. I don't know how to do people. You're doing fine." She fell asleep in his arms, in a bed that wasn't hers, in a house that felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived in years. The board voted her out 3 days later. Unanimous decision. Richard became CEO. Marcus sent a text that was mostly apology, partly accusation. The business press ran stories about her breakdown, her inability to handle stress, her dramatic fall from grace. Victoria read the articles with detached interest. They weren't wrong. She had broken down, had walked away, had let everything fall apart. But they missed the part where she was building something better from the pieces. She sold the penthouse, donated most of her designer clothes, kept enough money to be comfortable, gave away the rest to causes that mattered, set up a fund for people like the young gunman from the café, desperate people who needed help before they made desperate choices. She bought a small house 3 blocks from Daniel's. Nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a yard, space to breathe. Sarah helped her pick paint colors. Daniel helped her move in. Tommy brought beer and told terrible jokes. It was small, simple, real. And for the first time in Victoria's life, it was enough. The nightmares started 3 months after she bought the house. Victoria would wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the sound of gunshots still echoing in her ears. Except in the dreams, Daniel didn't make it. In the dreams, she watched him bleed out on marble floors while she did nothing. In the dreams, Sarah lost her father because Victoria had been too slow, too scared, too useless. The first time it happened, she was alone. She sat in her kitchen at 2 a.m, shaking, trying to convince herself it was just her brain processing trauma. That's what the therapist she'd finally started seeing said. Processing, like trauma was data that needed sorting. The second time she was at Daniel's. She woke him up with her thrashing, nearly caught him in the face with her elbow. He'd held her while she cried, asked no questions, just repeated that she was safe, it was over, everyone was okay. But everyone wasn't okay. Victoria wasn't okay? It's getting worse, she told Dr. Patel, a woman in her 60s who'd spent 30 years working with veterans and didn't take any of Victoria's deflection tactics. I thought it would get better with time, but it's like my brain won't let me forget. That's because you haven't forgiven yourself, Dr. Patel said. You froze. You were helpless. And for someone who spent 15 years making sure they were never helpless again, that's intolerable. So what do? You accept that you're human. You accept that fear is a normal response to violence. And you accept that you survived something terrible and you're allowed to struggle with it. I don't want to struggle. I want to be past it. That's not how trauma works. Victoria knew that, intellectually. But knowing something and accepting it were different countries with no bridge between them. The dreams bled into her days. She'd be working at the garage and suddenly her hands would shake. She'd hear a loud noise and freeze. Sarah dropped a book one afternoon and Victoria flinched so hard she knocked over a toolbox. Daniel noticed. Of course he noticed. But he didn't push. Just gave her space when she needed it, stayed close when she didn't. You should talk to someone who gets it, he said one night. They were on her couch, Sarah asleep in the spare room she'd basically claimed as her own. There's a group I used to go to, veterans, first responders, people who've seen things. I'm not a veteran. You don't have to be. You just have to have survived something that changed you. Victoria thought about that, about the café, about the moment her entire understanding of the world shattered, about kneeling on marble while men with guns decided if she lived or died. What if I don't fit? She asked. What if they look at me and see some rich woman playing at trauma? Then they'd be wrong, and you'd prove them wrong by showing up anyway. The group met in a church basement in Jackson Heights, 12 people in a circle of metal folding chairs, drinking bad coffee from styrofoam cups. Victoria almost turned around 3 times before forcing herself through the door. A woman in her 50s ran the session. Teresa, former EMT, had responded to the towers on September 11th and carried it with her ever since. She welcomed Victoria with a nod, no questions, just pointed to an empty chair. We don't do introductions unless you want to, Teresa said. You can talk. You can listen. You can sit there and say nothing. The only rule is respect. Everyone's pain is real. Nobody's trauma is more or less than anyone else's. Victoria sat, listened. A firefighter talked about a building collapse. A cop talked about a shooting that went wrong. A woman about her age talked about an abusive ex-husband and the night she finally fought back. Their stories were different. Their pain was the same. When it came to her turn, Victoria surprised herself by talking. I was in a cafe when it was robbed. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything. And someone else, a stranger, saved my life while I just knelt there being useless. Her voice cracked. And now I can't stop thinking about how weak I was, how I had all this power in my professional life, but when it actually mattered, I was nothing. Nobody told her she wasn't weak. Nobody said it was okay. They just nodded, understood, had been there themselves. After the meeting, the firefighter, Marcus, different Marcus, came over. "First time's the hardest," he said. "You came back next week. It gets a little easier. You keep coming, eventually you realize you're not alone in this." "Does it ever stop?" Victoria asked. "The nightmares." Sometimes. Sometimes they just get quieter. But yeah, it can get better." She went back the next week, and the week after. Started to recognize faces, hear stories that connected. Started to feel less like she was drowning alone and more like she was in a lifeboat with other survivors. But the nightmares didn't stop. If anything, they got more specific, more detailed. Her brain seemed determined to show her every possible way that day could have ended worse. It came to a head on a Tuesday in February. Sarah had a school project about family. She asked Victoria to come in and talk about her job. Former job. Whatever it was now. Victoria stood in front of 25 third graders and tried to explain what she used to do in words they'd understand. Investments, companies, money. It all sounded hollow. These kids didn't care about quarterly earnings. They wanted to know if she liked her job, if it was fun, what the best part was. "The best part," Victoria said slowly, "was feeling like I mattered, like I was important." A boy in the front row raised his hand. "Do you still feel important?" The question shouldn't have hurt. He was 8. He meant nothing by it. But Victoria felt it land in her chest like a punch. "I don't know, she said honestly. "I'm figuring that out." After the presentation, Sarah hugged her. "You did great. Michael's mom just talked about being an accountant for like an hour. You were way more interesting." But Victoria felt wrong, unsteady, like the ground was shifting under her feet. That night, the nightmare was different. This time, Daniel wasn't the one who got shot. This time, it was Sarah. The little girl from the café morphed into Sarah, and Victoria watched Daniel try to save his own daughter while she stood frozen, useless, unable to help. She woke up screaming. Daniel was there in seconds. He'd started keeping clothes at her place, staying over most nights. Sarah had her own room now, decorated with posters of horses and drawings she'd made. They were becoming something that looked like a family, and that terrified Victoria almost as much as the nightmares. "Same one?" Daniel asked, already knowing the answer. "Worse. It was Sarah this time, and I just stood there and, hey, look at me." He took her face in his hands. "Sarah's fine. She's asleep down the hall. Everyone's fine." "But what if next time? There is no next time. That was one moment. It's over." "It's not over. It's never over. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. Every loud noise, I'm back there. Every time Sarah's out of my sight for too long, I panic that something's happened." Victoria pulled away, stood up, paced. "I can't do this. I can't be this person who's broken and scared all the time. You're not broken. I am. I'm a mess. I left my entire life because I couldn't handle it anymore. I'm working in a garage because I don't know what else to do. I'm playing house with you and Sarah, but I don't actually know how to do this. How to be normal, how to be okay." Daniel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "You think I don't wake up some nights and see Afghanistan? You think I don't hear explosions that aren't there? You think I didn't spend 2 years after Sarah's mom died barely holding it together? That's different." "How?" "Because you're actually strong. You actually saved people. You actually matter." "And you don't?" Victoria felt tears coming, hot and angry and tired. "I froze. When it mattered most, I froze." So did I. First firefight in Kandahar, I froze for what felt like an hour. Was probably 3 seconds. Got someone hurt because of it. Carried that for years. Still carry it. He stood, walked to her. "But freezing doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And what you did after, walking away from everything you knew, choosing to build something real, that's brave. It doesn't feel brave. It never does. That's how you know it is." Victoria let him hold her. Let herself be scared and angry and broken in his arms. Let herself be all the things she'd spent her life pretending she wasn't. "I don't know how to get past this," she whispered. Maybe you don't get past it. Maybe you just learn to live with it, carry it different. The next morning, Sarah found them both asleep on the couch. She climbed up between them, all elbows and knees and morning breath. "Are you guys okay?" she asked. "I heard yelling. I had a bad dream," Victoria said. "Your dad was helping." "I get bad dreams sometimes too, about when my mom died. Dad says it's okay to be sad about things, even if they happened a long time ago." Victoria looked at this little girl who'd lost her mother at 4 and somehow grew up kind anyway. "Your dad's pretty smart." "I know. He's terrible at video games, though. Want to come over after school? We can beat him at Mario Kart." It was such a normal request, such a simple, everyday thing, and Victoria realized she wanted that. Wanted normal, wanted simple. Wanted to beat Daniel at Mario Kart and eat pizza and watch Sarah do homework and have the kind of life that wasn't about winning or losing, but just about being present. "Yeah," she said. "I'd like that." The weeks that followed were hard. Victoria kept going to the group, kept seeing Dr. Patel, kept waking up from nightmares and choosing to get up anyway. The dreams didn't stop, but they got less frequent. The panic attacks still happened, but she learned to breathe through them. And slowly, almost without noticing, she started to feel like herself. Not the self she'd been before the cafe, not even the self she'd been in the immediate aftermath. A new self. One that could hold multiple truths at once, that she was brave and scared, strong and vulnerable, healing and still wounded. She started helping more at the garage, not just doing grunt work, but actually learning the business. Tommy taught her about inventory management. Daniel showed her the books. She found herself offering suggestions, seeing inefficiencies, spotting opportunities. "You know," Daniel said one afternoon, "we could expand. There's a space next door that's opening up. We could add another bay, maybe hire someone. You'd need capital for that." "Yeah," which we don't have. Victoria thought about the money sitting in her accounts. More than she needed, more than she could spend in a lifetime. "What if you did? Have capital?" Daniel looked at her. "Victoria, not charity, investment. I know the business. I know it's profitable. You could pay me back." "That's not... I don't want your money." "It's not about what you want. It's about what makes sense." She pulled up the books on the computer. "You're turning away customers because you don't have capacity. You could hire 2 more mechanics, double your revenue in a year. This isn't charity, Daniel. This is smart business." "And what do you get out of it?" "A purpose. Something to build that actually matters." He was skeptical. She knew he would be. But over the next few weeks, she put together a real plan. Projections, timelines, hiring strategies. Brought it to him like she used to bring acquisition proposals to the board. "You're serious about this," he said, reading through it. "Completely. You're good at what you do. You should be able to grow." "And you'd what, be a silent partner?" "I'd be whatever you need me to be." Daniel set down his papers, looked at her. "You know what I need you to be?" "What?" "Here. Present. Not trying to fix me or save me or invest in me. Just here." Victoria felt something settle in her chest. "I can do that." "Good. Then, yeah, let's expand, but as partners, equal. You're not just the money. You're part of this." They shook on it, started planning the expansion. Victoria found herself energized in a way she hadn't been since before the cafe. But this was different. This wasn't about domination or winning. This was about building something with people she cared about. Sarah got excited about the expansion, drew pictures of what the new bay should look like, insisted they needed a vending machine, made Daniel promise they'd have a spot where she could do homework after school. "She's getting attached," Victoria said one night. She and Daniel were going over contractor bids. Sarah was asleep. "To me, to this, what if what? What if I mess it up? What if I wake up one day and realize I can't do this and I leave and she's hurt?" Daniel set down his pen. "You could. That's always possible. But you could also stay. Build something real. Be the person you keep trying to convince yourself you can't be." "Which person is that?" "Someone who stays. Someone who chooses people over power." He paused. "Someone I'm falling in love with." Victoria's breath caught. They hadn't said that yet. had been dancing around it for months, and now it was there, out in the open, impossible to take back. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Do what?" "Love someone. Be loved. I don't have a good track record." "Neither do I. Sarah's mom and I were a disaster. Everything after has been worse. But this, what we're doing, this feels different. It feels terrifying." "Yeah, that too." He smiled. "But maybe we could be terrified together. See what happens." Victoria thought about running, about protecting herself, about all the reasons this was a bad idea. Then she thought about Sarah's laugh, about working in the garage, about waking up next to Daniel and feeling like she was home. "Okay," she said, "let's be terrified together." The expansion took 4 months. They hired 2 mechanics, both women, because Tommy pointed out the auto industry needed more of that. Built out the new bay, added the vending machine Sarah insisted on, created a small office area where Victoria could work and Sarah could study. The business grew. Word spread. They started getting customers from all over Queens, then Brooklyn, then Manhattan. People liked the honesty, liked that they weren't being sold things they didn't need, liked that a woman with grease on her hands might be the one fixing their car. Victoria found herself featured in a local business journal. Former CEO finds new purpose in Queens auto shop. The article was mostly accurate. Talked about her fall from grace, her decision to walk away, her choice to build something smaller but real. Richard saw it, called her for the first time in months. "You're fixing cars now." He sounded baffled. Among other things, "Victoria, this is insane. You could come back. The board's had time to cool down. Marcus wants you back. Hell, I'd step aside if—" "I don't want to come back, Richard." "Why not? What you're doing now, it's beneath you." "No," Victoria said calmly. "It's not. That's what I couldn't see before. There's nothing beneath me. There's just work that matters and work that doesn't. And this matters." "To who?" "To me. To the people we help. To a little girl who needs to see that adults can choose differently. To a man who deserves a partner, not a project." She paused. "I'm happy, Richard. For the first time in my adult life, I'm actually happy. Can you say that?" The silence on the other end was answer enough. When she hung up, Daniel was watching from the doorway. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm good." And she was. The nightmares still came sometimes. The trauma didn't just disappear, but she'd learned to carry it different, like Daniel said. Learned that being scared didn't make her weak, that needing help didn't make her less. That building a life on her own terms, even if those terms looked nothing like what she'd planned, was its own kind of victory. That night, they had dinner together. Her, Daniel, Sarah, Tommy, and his wife, the 2 new mechanics. Crowded around a table that wasn't big enough, eating pizza, arguing about basketball, being loud and messy and alive. Sarah leaned against Victoria's shoulder. "This is my family now," she announced. "Not just Dad, all of you." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Good tears. The kind that meant something was right instead of wrong. "Yeah," she said, putting her arm around the girl. "This is family." Later, after everyone left and Sarah was in bed, Victoria and Daniel sat on her back steps. Spring was coming. The air was warmer. Things were growing. "You know what's weird?" Victoria said. "What?" "I thought losing everything would destroy me. The company, the money, the power. I thought that was who I was." She looked at him. "But losing it saved me, gave me room to become someone I actually like." "You like yourself now?" "Getting there. Some days better than others. But yeah, I'm getting there." Daniel kissed her, soft, sure, like they had all the time in the world. "I love you, he said, just in case that wasn't clear earlier. Victoria smiled. "I love you too. Even though you're terrible at Mario Kart and you leave your socks everywhere and you're way too patient with me when I'm being difficult. Someone has to be." They sat there as the night deepened. Inside, Sarah slept safe. Tomorrow, they'd go to the garage, work with their hands, build something that mattered, be present for the small moments that added up to a life. And Victoria realized this was it. This was the thing she'd been chasing all those years. Not success, not victory, just this. Just being known, being seen, being loved for who she actually was, not what she could do or provide or achieve. Just being human. And that was more than enough. The call came on a Thursday morning in June, 18 months after the café. Victoria was under a Toyota, teaching one of the new mechanics how to properly check for transmission leaks when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it, let it go to voicemail. Whoever it was could wait. But then it rang again, and again. She slid out from under the car, wiped her hands on her coveralls, and checked the screen. Marcus. She almost didn't answer. They hadn't spoken in months. Whatever corporate drama he was dealing with wasn't her problem anymore. But something made her pick up. Marcus. Victoria, thank God. I need to see you in person. It's important. I'm working. It's about the fund, the one you set up, for people in crisis situations. Victoria's hand tightened on the phone. She'd established that fund with money from selling her stake in the company. Set it up to help people like the young gunman from the café, people desperate enough to make terrible choices. Marcus had helped her structure it, but she'd barely thought about it since. Just signed off on distributions and let the board run it. What about it? There's a situation. Can you meet me, please? Something in his voice made her say yes. She told Daniel she'd be back later, drove into Manhattan for the first time in months. The city felt foreign now, too loud, too fast, too much. Marcus waited at a coffee shop in Midtown. Not the cafe where it happened. That place had closed 6 months ago. Couldn't recover from the publicity. This was somewhere generic, forgettable. He looked older, tired. Victoria slid into the booth across from him and waited. There's a woman, he said, mid-30s, single mother, 2 kids, lost her job 3 months ago. Behind on rent, facing eviction. She applied to the fund, and the board approved emergency assistance. Rent for 3 months while she finds work. Okay, so what's the problem? She's Elena Rodriguez, the mother from the café, the one with the little girl. Victoria's breath stopped. The woman Daniel had shielded. The child who'd been held hostage. She'd thought about them over the months, wondered if they were okay, if the trauma had damaged them the way it had damaged her. Are they okay? The daughter? Physically, yes. Emotionally? Marcus shrugged. The application mentioned ongoing therapy, nightmares. The girl has trouble in school now, anxiety, they're struggling. Victoria felt the old familiar weight settle in her chest. Guilt, responsibility, the sense that she should have done more. Why are you telling me this? The fund is supposed to be anonymous. Because she asked to meet you. When she found out who established the fund, she specifically requested a meeting, said she needed to thank you in person. Marcus paused. I told her that wasn't how it works. But Victoria, I think maybe you should. I think maybe you both need it. Victoria thought about saying no, about maintaining boundaries, about protecting herself from the reminder of that day. Instead, she said, set it up. They met 3 days later in a park in Corona. Neutral ground, public, safe. Elena sat on a bench with her daughter. Maria, Victoria remembered her name now. The girl was bigger than she'd been, 7 now, still small but growing. Victoria approached slowly. Elena saw her and stood. They looked at each other for a long moment. 2 women connected by violence and survival and the particular bond of shared trauma. Ms. Hale, Elena said, thank you for coming. Please, Victoria. She sat down. Maria watched her with huge dark eyes. How are you both? Elena stopped, started again. We're alive, that's something. Some days that feels like enough. Other days, it doesn't, Victoria finished. I know. They talked for an hour, about the café, about the aftermath, about nightmares and therapy, and the way the world looked different now. Maria stayed quiet mostly, coloring in a book, but every so often she'd look up at Victoria with an expression that was too old for 7. I wanted to thank you, Elena said, not just for the fund, for being there that day, for surviving with us. I didn't do anything. I froze. You were human. You were scared. That's okay. That's allowed. Elena's voice was gentle. The man who saved us. Daniel? He came to visit us. Few months after. Made sure we were okay. Brought Maria a stuffed animal. He told us about you. About how you were struggling too. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Of course Daniel had checked on them. Of course he had. He's a good man, she said. He is. And he loves you. Anyone could see that. Elena smiled. He said you were learning that being scared doesn't make you weak. That surviving is its own kind of strength. I'm still learning that. Me too. Elena looked at Maria. We both are, but we're here. We're trying, and some days that has to be enough. When Victoria left the park an hour later, she felt different. Lighter somehow. Like seeing Elena and Maria okay, not perfect, not healed, but okay, had untangled something in her chest. She called Daniel from the car. Hey, he answered. How'd it go? You went to see them. Elena and Maria. You didn't tell me. Didn't seem important. Just wanted to make sure they were all right. You brought Maria a stuffed animal. She liked elephants. Mentioned it when... He stopped. Yeah, I brought her an elephant. Victoria felt something crack open inside her. Love, pure and simple and overwhelming. I'm coming home, and we need to talk. That sounds ominous. It's not. I promise. Just, I love you. And I need to say it when I'm looking at you. She drove back to Queens. Found Daniel at the garage closing up for the day. Sarah was inside doing homework, headphones on, oblivious. Hey, Victoria said, can we talk? They sat in his truck, the same truck he'd picked her up in all those months ago when she'd quit her job and didn't know what came next. I've been thinking, Victoria said, about the cafe, about what happened after, about all the ways I tried to make sense of it. Okay. And I realized something today. Seeing Elena and Maria. They're not okay. Not really. But they're building a life anyway. Choosing to keep going even when it's hard. Even when the trauma doesn't go away. She took his hand. That's what you taught me. Not to wait until I'm healed. Not to wait until I'm ready. Just to choose. Every day. To show up and try. Daniel was quiet. Then, where's this going? I want to marry you. The words hung there. Victoria hadn't planned to say them. Hadn't rehearsed. They just came out, true and terrifying and right. Daniel stared at her. You what? I want to marry you. I want to be Sarah's stepmom officially. I want to build this life we're building and make it permanent. I want... She stopped, breathed. I want to choose you every day for the rest of my life. Victoria, I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a year and a half. I know I'm still figuring out who I am without my company. I know I have nightmares and trauma, and I'm a mess half the time. But I also know that you're the best person I've ever met. And Sarah is the best thing that ever happened to me. And I don't want to wait until I'm perfect or healed or ready because I'll never be any of those things. I just want to be yours. Daniel didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he started laughing. What's funny? Victoria felt panic spike. Did I mess this up? No, you didn't mess it up. He pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box, opened it. Inside was a ring. Simple, beautiful, exactly right. I've been carrying this for 3 months, trying to figure out the perfect moment, the perfect words, and you just did it first. Victoria started laughing too, crying and laughing at the same time. Are you serious? Completely. I was going to ask you at Sarah's birthday next month. Had this whole thing planned. She helped pick out the ring. She knows? She insisted. Said if I was going to marry you, she got a say in the ring. He took it out of the box. So, Victoria Hale, will you marry me? I already asked you, and I'm asking you back. That's how this works. Yes, Victoria said. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring on her finger, kissed her. And for a moment the world was just the two of them in a beat-up truck in Queens, choosing each other. Then Sarah knocked on the window. Are you guys done being gross? Because I'm hungry, and I saw the ring box and I want to know if you said yes. They told her together. Sarah screamed, literally screamed, then ran inside to call her aunt and tell everyone that Victoria was going to be her mom. "She's been calling you mom for months," Daniel said quietly, "just not to your face. Didn't want to pressure you." Victoria felt her heart break and remake itself all at once. "She calls me mom?" "To her friends, to her teachers, to anyone who'll listen. You're her mom, Victoria. Have been for a while. The wedding's just going to make it official." They got married 3 months later. Small ceremony in the backyard of Victoria's house. Sarah was the maid of honor. Tommy officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this. Elena and Maria came. The people from Victoria's trauma group. The mechanics from the garage. Marcus showed up, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes. Even Dr. Patel made an appearance. No business associates. No board members. No one from her old life except the few who'd proven they cared about her as a person, not a position. Victoria wore a simple dress. Nothing designer. Nothing that cost more than a car. Just a white dress that Sarah had helped her pick out, saying it made her look pretty, but not scary. When it came time for vows, Victoria found herself crying before she even started talking. "I spent 15 years building walls," she said, "protecting myself, making sure no one could hurt me again. And then I met you, and you didn't tear down those walls. You just quietly showed me I didn't need them. That being vulnerable was brave. That choosing connection over control was strength, not weakness." She looked at Sarah. "Both of you showed me that. You taught me what actually matters, and I promise to show up. Every day, to choose this. Choose us. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Daniel's vows were shorter, simpler, but they landed just as hard. "You saved my life," he said. "Not at the cafe, after. When I'd gotten so used to just surviving that I forgot what it meant to actually live. You reminded me. You chose us when you could have chosen anything. And I promise to keep reminding you that you're enough. That you've always been enough. That you don't have to earn love by being perfect. You just have to be you." They kissed. Everyone cheered. Sarah tackled them both in a hug. And Victoria thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago. Standing in a cafe, dismissing a stranger, about to have her entire world destroyed and remade. That woman wouldn't recognize this, wouldn't understand how losing everything led to gaining what actually mattered. But Victoria understood now. Understood that sometimes the worst moments break you open just enough to let the light in. That survival is only the beginning. That building a life worth living takes courage and choice, and showing up even when you're scared. The reception was loud and chaotic and perfect. Sarah made a speech about how she always wanted a mom, and now she had the best one. Tommy told embarrassing stories about Daniel. Elena pulled Victoria aside and said, "You did it. You built something beautiful." As the sun set and the party wound down, Victoria stood with Daniel watching Sarah dance with Maria. 2 little girls who had survived something terrible and were somehow still able to laugh. "You think they'll be okay?" Victoria asked. "Really okay?" "I think they'll have bad days, good days, days where the trauma wins and days where they do. But yeah, I think they'll be okay." He pulled her close. "Like us. We're okay? Getting there. Every day." Later that night, after everyone left and Sarah was asleep in her room, their room, in their house, their family, Victoria and Daniel, sat on the back steps like they had so many times before. "I never thanked you," Victoria said, "for saving my life. You don't need to thank me for that. Not just at the cafe. After. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For being patient while I figured out how to be human again. For loving me when I was still learning how to love myself." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "You saved me too, you know. I was so stuck in just surviving, just getting through days. You reminded me there was more. That I could want things, build things, be happy, not just okay." They sat there in comfortable silence. The city hummed in the distance. Stars tried to break through the light pollution. The ordinary miracle of another day ending, another one waiting to begin. "You ever think about the cafe?" Victoria asked. "About how different things would be if it hadn't happened?" "Sometimes. But then I remember that's not how life works. We don't get to know what would have been. We just get what is. And what is..." He gestured at the house, at the life they'd built. This is pretty good. Yeah, Victoria said. It really is. 5 years later, Victoria stood in the garage on a Tuesday afternoon. Business had grown. They had 4 locations now across Queens and Brooklyn, employed 23 people. She'd written a book about her experience, not a business book, but a memoir about trauma and transformation. It had done well. Not bestseller well, but well enough that people wrote her letters saying it helped. She still had nightmares sometimes. Still went to the trauma group. Still saw Dr. Patel monthly. The cafe hadn't stopped haunting her, but she'd learned to live with ghosts. They were just part of her now, part of her story. Sarah was 13 now. Moody and brilliant and kind. Had started volunteering with Maria at a program for kids dealing with trauma. Was talking about becoming a therapist when she grew up. Wanted to help people the way she'd been helped. Daniel's shoulder still ached when it rained. He still woke up sometimes from Afghanistan nightmares. But less often. Quieter. They'd learned to hold each other's broken pieces without trying to fix them. Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Maria had gotten into a special art program. Full scholarship. Was doing a piece about survival and hope. Wanted Victoria to come to the opening. She sent back 3 words. I'll be there. Her old assistant Emma called sometimes. Had left the corporate world too. Started a nonprofit helping women transition out of high-pressure careers. Asked Victoria for advice regularly. Told her once, "You showed me it was possible to choose differently. That's everything." Marcus retired last year, bought a cabin in Vermont. Said he was learning to fish, learning to be still. They had coffee when he was in the city. He'd apologized a dozen times for not seeing what was happening to her back then. She'd forgiven him a dozen times. Forgiveness was easier now. Everything was easier when you stopped carrying so much weight. Richard still ran the company. Sent her a card every Christmas. Always signed, "Hope you're well." She was well. Better than well. She was happy. That night, the whole family went to Maria's art showing. The piece she'd created was stunning. A mixed media installation called After. It showed the cafe, the chaos, the fear, but also what came after, the healing, the connection, the way trauma could break you open to let new things grow. Maria gave a short speech, 13 years old and already understanding things most adults never learned. "I used to think the worst day of my life was the cafe," she said. "The day a man pointed a gun at my mom and me. The day I learned the world was dangerous. But now I understand that day was also when I learned the world had people like Daniel and Victoria in it. People who show up, who choose kindness, who prove that we're not alone in this." After the showing, they all went out for pizza. Victoria sat between Daniel and Sarah, across from Elena and Maria, surrounded by people who understood that survival was just the beginning, that building a life after trauma took courage and choice, and showing up even when it hurt. "Mom," Sarah said, mouth full of pizza, "can Maria sleep over Friday?" "Mom." Victoria still got a little teary hearing it. Probably always would. "Sure, kiddo, but you're both doing homework first." They groaned in perfect unison. Victoria caught Elena's eye. They smiled at each other. 2 mothers, 2 survivors, 2 women who'd been broken by violence and chose to heal anyway. On the drive home, Sarah fell asleep in the back seat. Daniel drove. Victoria watched the city pass by the window. This city that had almost killed her. This city where she'd lost everything. This city where she'd found what actually mattered. "You good?" Daniel asked, reaching for her hand. "Yeah," Victoria said, and meant it. "I'm good." That night, after Sarah was in bed, Victoria stood in the bathroom looking at herself in the mirror. Same face, different person. She had scars now, not visible ones, but they were there. She carried them. But she also carried Sarah's laugh, Daniel's steady presence, the knowledge that she'd survived something terrible and built something beautiful from the wreckage. She thought about the woman she'd been at the cafe that day, so certain of her power, so convinced that strength meant never being vulnerable, so wrong about what mattered. If she could talk to that woman now, what would she say? Maybe nothing. Maybe that woman needed to learn the hard way, needed to have her world shattered, needed to be stripped of everything she thought defined her so she could find out who she actually was underneath. Or maybe she'd say, "You're about to go through something terrible. It's going to break you, and that's okay. Because on the other side of breaking is the chance to rebuild. And this time you get to choose what you build. Choose better, choose love, choose connection, choose to be human instead of invincible. Victoria turned off the light, went to bed. Daniel was already asleep. She curled up against him, felt his arm come around her automatically, listened to his breathing and Sarah's soft snoring from down the hall. This was it. This was the life she'd built from the ruins of the one she'd lost. Small, imperfect, real. Full of people who knew her scars and loved her anyway. Full of work that mattered and moments that counted and the ordinary miracle of being known. The cafe had happened. The trauma was real. The scars were permanent. But so was this. So was love. So was the choice to keep going. To keep building. To keep showing up for the people who mattered. Victoria closed her eyes. For once, she didn't dread sleep. Didn't fear the nightmares. They might come. They might not. Either way, she'd wake up tomorrow in this house, with this family, living this life she'd built from nothing, and that was everything. That was enough. That was more than she'd ever dreamed of back when she thought power and money and control were what mattered. The worst day of her life had led to this. The moment she'd been most helpless had cracked her open just enough to let the light in. The second she'd lost everything had been the second she'd started finding what she actually needed. And lying there in the dark, listening to the people she loved breathe, Victoria understood something she'd spent her whole life missing. You don't measure a life by how much you win. You measure it by how much you love, how much you show up, how much you choose connection over safety, vulnerability over armor, truth over image. She'd chosen wrong for so long. But she was choosing right now, every day, every moment, every breath. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough to build a whole life on. The kind of life worth living. The kind of life worth surviving for. The kind of life that proved the worst moments can become the doorway to the best ones, if you're brave enough to walk through. Victoria fell asleep with Daniel's arm around her, and Sarah safe down the hall, and tomorrow waiting with all its ordinary miracles. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't dream of the cafe. She dreamed of home.